Every financial guru shows you the same chart. A line that starts flat, then curves, then shoots straight up. That's compound interest, they say. The eighth wonder of the world. What they never show you is the part before the curve, the part where most Americans quietly give up, the part where the chart lies about how long the flat line actually lasts. Marcus is a 34-year-old nurse in Houston, Texas. Smart guy. Works hard. 3 years ago, he watched a video, maybe something like this one, that showed him how compound interest works, the hockey stick chart, the math that seemed almost magical. He opened a Roth IRA that same week, contributed $200 a month, set it up on autopay, and told himself he was finally doing the right thing. Then 12 months later, he checked the balance, $2,400 in contributions, and his account showed $2,614, $214 in gains on a year's worth of disciplined saving. He sat with that number for a while. He'd been promised a snowball rolling down a mountain. What he got felt more like a marble rolling across a parking lot. He didn't quit, but he thought about it, because nobody had prepared him for how long the flat part of the compound interest chart actually is. Nobody had shown him what the math looks like in year 1, year 3, year 7, before the curve shows up. And here is the uncomfortable truth that most compound interest content never tells you. Marcus isn't behind. Marcus is exactly on schedule. But most people at his stage don't know that. And because they don't know it, they stop. They redirect that $200 to something that feels more real, more immediate. And the one financial force powerful enough to change their entire future quietly stops working for them the moment they do. This video is about what nobody tells Marcus, about why compound interest is completely real and also completely misrepresented at the same time, and about the specific number, the one that actually unlocks the curve that most Americans never reach. Here's what we're going to cover in the next 13 minutes. You're going to understand why the compound interest chart you've been shown is technically true and functionally misleading at the same time. You're going to see the real timeline with actual numbers of what compound growth looks like at every stage. You're going to discover the specific threshold where the math stops feeling like a lie and starts feeling like the miracle everyone promised. And you're going to walk away with a clear, honest framework for where you actually stand right now and what to do about it. No hype, no hockey stick without the context, just a truth about one of the most powerful and most misunderstood forces in personal finance. Hi, it's Logan from Logan Wealth, your trusted source for personal finance, investing, retirement planning, taxes, budgeting, inflation, and long-term wealth building strategies. We break down complex financial topics into practical, easy-to-understand insights so you can make smarter money decisions with confidence. Now, let's dive in.
The chart is real. The timeline is the lie. Let's start with the math everyone shows you. And let's be honest about what it actually says. The standard compound interest example goes like this. You invest $10,000 at a 7% average annual return. After 10 years, you have about $19,700. After 20 years, $38,700. After 30 years, $76,100. After 40 years, $149,700. That is a real calculation. That math is correct. But look at what actually happened in the first decade. You put in $10,000. 10 years passed, and you have $19,700, meaning in 10 full years of compound growth, a decade of your life, you made $9,700. That is $970 per year in gains on $10,000. Now, look at the last decade of that same chart. Between year 30 and year 40, your money goes from $76,100 to $149,700. That is a gain of $73,600 in one decade, on the same 7% return. Same percentage, same fund, same rate. But the final decade produces 76 times more dollars than the first. That right there is the thing nobody explains clearly enough. Compound interest is not linear. It is exponential, and exponential growth has a shape that looks profoundly boring for a very long time, and then becomes extraordinary, but only if you are still in the game when the curve finally arrives. Here's where it gets real for most Americans, because the uncomfortable question is not whether compound interest works. It does. The question is whether the average person starts early enough and stays consistent long enough to actually reach the part of the curve that changes their life. And the data says, for most Americans, The answer is no. Where most Americans actually are. Let's put real numbers on the table, because this is where the compound interest promise meets American reality. According to Vanguard's How America Saves 2026 report, the median 401k balance across 4.6 million accounts at year-end 2025 was $44,115. The average was $167,970. That gap, median of $44,115 versus average of $167,970, tells you everything. A small group of large balances is pulling the average way up. The person in the middle of the distribution, the truly typical American saver, has $44,115. The number they say they need is $1.46 million. The gap between those two numbers is $1,415,885, and compound interest is the only realistic mechanism that closes it. But here is what the math requires to close it. Someone who starts at 25 instead of 35, contributing just $500 a month, ends up with roughly $500,000 more by age 65 due to compounding. $500,000 from one decade's head start. Not from earning more, not from investing differently, just from starting earlier and staying in longer. That is the promise. Now, here's the problem. As of 2025, 29% of American non-retirees have no retirement savings at all. Zero. Not a small balance. Nothing. And the median retirement savings for Americans under 35 is just $18,880, about 67% below the Fidelity benchmark for that age group. The people who need compound interest the most are starting the latest, and the ones who start late often don't stay long enough to reach the inflection point, which means the eighth wonder of the world is quietly working for the people who got in early and stayed, and quietly sitting idle for tens of millions of people who were told about it, but never understood what it actually required. The threshold. The number nobody names. Now here is the part that almost nobody makes explicit, but it is the most important idea in this video. Compound interest has a threshold, a specific point where the math stops feeling like a lie and starts feeling like the miracle everyone promised. That point is where your investment returns in a single year start to exceed what you contribute in that year. Think about what that means. You are contributing $500 a month or $6,000 a year. The threshold is the moment when your portfolio generates more than $6,000 in annual returns on its own without you adding a single dollar. At a 7% return, that threshold is a portfolio of approximately $85,700. Below $85,700, your contributions are doing more work than your returns. You are still pushing the snowball uphill. The math is working, it's just invisible. At $85,700 and above, the portfolio starts generating more annually than you contribute. The snowball crests the hill, and from that point forward, the slope works with you instead of against you. This is the number that changes everything, and most people quit before they reach it. Not because they planned to quit, because the flat part of the curve lasted longer than they were prepared for, and nothing they were told had explained that the flat part was supposed to be flat. The real enemy. It is not patience. Here's what most compound interest content gets wrong about why people quit. They blame patience. They say Americans are too focused on the short term, too prone to instant gratification, too tempted by lifestyle spending to stay consistent. And sure, some of that is true, but let me tell you what the data actually shows. In 2024, only 35% of American workers felt on track for retirement, down from 40% in 2021. And even among Americans aged 60 and over, only 50% felt prepared. 50% of people within 5 years of retirement age, not confident they are prepared. That's not an impatience problem. That's an information problem, a gap between what people were told compound interest would feel like and what it actually feels like during the first decade of building. Marcus the nurse expected to feel the magic. He felt a marble rolling across a parking lot. Nobody told him that the parking lot was the required path to the mountain. Nobody showed him that at $44,000 in his account, he would generate about $3,080 in annual returns. And at $87,000, he would generate $6,090. And at $150,000, he would generate over $10,000 annually without a single additional action. Nobody showed him the intermediate milestones, the moments where the math becomes feels more visible, where the number you see in January is genuinely different from the number you saw the January before, by an amount that finally starts to feel something. Those intermediate milestones are not in the hockey stick chart, but they are in the math. And knowing they exist, knowing that at $44,000 you're generating $3,000 a year, that at $85,000 you cross the contribution threshold, that at $150,000 you're generating over $10,000 annually without a single additional action. That knowledge is what keeps people in the game when the visual hasn't arrived yet.
What actually gets you there? Let's make this practical, because knowing what compound interest actually requires is only useful if you know what to do about it. The honest framework is 3 things. First, the starting balance matters more than the rate of return in the early years. Getting to $25,000 faster by contributing more aggressively in years 1 through 5 does more for your long-term outcome than finding an investment with a slightly higher annual return. The contribution is the engine in the early stage. The compounding takes over later. Second, interruptions are far more expensive than they appear. Someone who invests $5,000 per year from age 22 to 32, then stops completely, ends up with more money at age 67 than someone who invests $5,000 per year from age 32 to 67 at the same 7% return. 10 years of contributions beats 35 years of contributions if the 10 years happen first. The math does not care about effort. It cares about time, which means every year of delay costs more than the year before it. Third, to reach $1.46 million starting from zero at age 35 with a 7% return, you need to invest approximately $4,607 per month. Starting at 25, that same target requires about $385 per month. The difference between starting at 25 and starting at 35 is not $4,222 per month forever. It is a one-time decision made once that restructures every month of the next 40 years. That is the real compound interest story, not the hockey stick, the decision that happens before the chart even starts. Let me close the loop on Marcus. He is 34. He's been contributing $200 a month for 3 years. He has roughly $7,800 in his Roth IRA. At 7% annual returns, he's generating about $546 a year on that balance. Not visible, not exciting, but here's what happens if he does not quit. At 44, if he maintains his contributions, his balance approaches $65,000. He's now generating over $4,500 per year in returns. That's over $375 a month passively on top of his contributions. At 54, his balance is pushing $180,000. He's now generating $12,600 a year. That's $1,050 a month the market is handing him before he contributes a single dollar. At 65, if he stays consistent, his balance exceeds $400,000. He's generating $28,000 a year passively, more than many Americans earn at a full-time job. From a $200 a month habit, he started at 31. The hockey stick is real. Marcus just hasn't reached it yet. The question is not whether it arrives. The question is whether he's still in the account when it does. Hey, quick pause here. Not to ask for a like, not to remind you to subscribe. I want to ask you to do something different. After this video, I want you to pull up your actual retirement account balance, whatever number is there right now, and divide it by 14.3. That gives you your current annual return at a 7% rate. Write that number down. That is what compound interest is generating for you right now, today, while you sleep. Then come back and watch the rest of this video, because the next section is about what that number becomes when you don't quit. I pinned something specific in the comments, not a question this time. I pinned the compound interest milestone chart I mentioned in this video, the one that shows what your portfolio generates annually at $25,000, $44,000, $85,000, $150,000, and $300,000. Check the pinned comment after you watch and see where you are on the curve right now. Your number might surprise you. Here is the biggest lie about compound interest. Not that it does not work. It works. The mouth is airtight and has been for over a century. The lie is the timeline, the implication that the curve shows up early enough to feel motivating before most people decide whether to keep going. It does not. The platform is real. The parking lot is long, and nobody putting together that hockey stick chart bothers to label the x-axis with the years it actually takes to get to the bend. Marcus's $214 in year one gains was not a failure. It was the first inch of a runway that eventually becomes a mountain. He just didn't know that's what it was. Now you do. The people who reach the curve are not the ones who found a better investment or a smarter strategy. They are the ones who understood the timeline clearly enough that the flat part didn't fool them into thinking the curve wasn't coming. The curve is coming for everyone who stays in the game long enough to see it. Stay in the game. If today's video made compound interest finally click in a way it never had before, I think you'll get a lot out of my video called How to Fill Up Lower Tax Brackets Strategically. It covers exactly how to keep more of what your investments earn, because building the balance is only half the equation. Protecting it from unnecessary taxes is the other half. I'll see you there.